Thank you for tuning into the Natty News Daily podcast. This episode is brought to you in part by our sponsor, Core Nutritionals. You can check out corenutritionals.com for all your supplement needs and use code Natty News Daily at checkout to save 20%. Enjoy the episode.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Natty News Daily. Dan and I are joined this week by Ryan and John, the president and vice president of the IPE and NANBF, respectively. Thanks for coming on the podcast, guys. We've been trying to schedule this for a little bit. We had talked previously. Things got delayed, but it's good to have you on and to pick your brains for the night.
Yeah, guys, thanks. We really appreciate you guys having us on, and especially really appreciate for everything you guys are doing with the natural bodybuilding community. You know, you see your content, see your stories, your podcasts, and I love it.
We're doing what we can. Three-man show, not as much as we want for sure, but doing what we can to spread the sport, that's for sure.
Well,
Yeah,
Ryan and I sometimes think we're like a two-man show. Actually, a three-man show.
It's nice to have other people in support. I'm sure you guys have found that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we found that we have our own different strengths, and one person, without having like a true operating agreement saying like, I'm the director of this and you do that. It's just, all right, Dan, you do your thing, Leroy does his thing, and I handle mine, and we just kind of, weave around each other in this chaos that tends to work out for the most part. Yeah, we've been doing it long enough. So yeah, IP, NANBF, for our domestic followers, they're probably familiar with those, acronyms. For the international athletes, let's hear a little bit of history about the federation, where it started, where it came from, and then obviously we'll dive into like where you guys are taking it. So I'll turn it right over to whichever one of you want to start.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you. I appreciate it. So we've been around for, since the 80s. I mean, this is our 40th year celebration. I myself have been promoting for 21 years. John and his wife been promoting for 29 years. So between the two of us, we got 50 years of promoting, and we've probably put on 100 competitions between just us, individually. But yeah, we've been around since the 80s, and it's one of those things where we've just grown. We're based in the Midwest is where we started. I'm located here in Iowa. John and his wife Becky are in Missouri, and it's just grown from there. We still have a very predominant footprint in the Midwest, but we've expanded into other areas of the country, East Coast, Southeast, Southwest. We also have a Canadian affiliate, the NPAA. And so we've been adamant on being about the athlete. And I think that, we're not the only federation to say that, but I truly believe that that's something that, having been involved in the sport for, over 30 years, I can say, first starting as an athlete, a teenager myself, having grown up with the NANBF, I feel like that's something that we've definitely done a good job of. John, would you add to that?
Well, sure. I mean, the bottom line is, like Ryan said about the athlete. I'm going to tell you seriously, that guy and I both. Heck, I just competed in 2019. Didn't you just compete last year, Ryan?
Yeah, 22. Yeah, 2022.
Yeah. And what did you win?
The Pro Masters Cup. So,
and I did too. And but no, what I'm trying to say is that, we like to kind of stay in touch and understand what's going on, because it's like if you step away from it for a while, like I did, and like Ryan didn't compete for a while, you want to really get back in that thick of it just to kind of get a good feel, and it's always good to do that. It really, really is. And a lot of the federations will talk about, hey, all your promoters should be pros. Well, it's pretty much that way on our side. You always hear that. And because a lot of us are just older people. We've been competing forever and off and on and whatnot. So, yeah, it's kind of like, I started back when it was Scott Dickerson, and when Jim Evans kind of started the whole deal in the NBA at the time. And then Scott took it over and turned it into NANBF. And that had to be, God, that Ryan, was that like the 92, something like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So And my first show was 1997 with Scott. We kind of did it together to some degree, and then we took it on over. But the bottom line is, we've been around a long time, and we've seen a lot of trends, a lot of things that have changed, and we've been through the wars. Believe me, guys. I mean, there's a lot of battle scars on Ryan and I both, but the thing is, those scars are good sometimes because we understand really what the athlete wants and what we think that is the best route to go for natural bodybuilding as a whole, not just us. And we've had a lot of talks about this for a long time. And so that's kind of where we want to go with this, maybe. So
yeah. Let's dive right into that, right? Because like you said, a lot of federations say like by the athlete, for the athlete, whatever. You guys obviously are athletes, right? As well as promoters, as well as executives. You like to keep your pulse, keep your finger on the pulse. So in your definition, in your eyes, what do the athletes want? I think this will be interesting.
Yeah, no, I love that. In fact, kind of like what John said there, when I competed 2 years ago, I mean, I loved it. I mean, I love the sport, but I love being in the trenches and like being an athlete, just being there and listening and asking for feedback. And we do that all the time. In fact, we have advisory committees and we listen to coaches, listen to athletes, and we've done a lot of things over the years. Athletes want more stage time, so we gave more stage time. They wanted more efficiencies, and so we started live judging, continuous formatting. Gosh, when the world blew up during the pandemic, they just wanted a contest, and so we were like, I think the first in the country to actually have a contest during that time. And so I think we've really kept our ears to the ground, listening to that. They wanted transparency. We give them their judges' feedback. We give them all that stuff. So I think that we're constantly evolving. I mean, no federation is perfect, and we certainly aren't. But by listening and being able to pivot and also to continue to be smart enough to know we don't know everything, and then just to use that feedback to keep growing. I think that's why we're growing and why athletes are so loyal to us. So
yeah, and to your credit, I only know it just kind of through a couple friends, but actually, from my understanding, the NANBF is one of the first federations to bring about classic physique, or at least to push it. And then not only that, but to differentiate it with very different posing and standard poses for that division, separating it from the bodybuilding. So I mean, credit to you guys for embracing that and adapting that. And I think that goes to show that you're willing to change outside of what traditional bodybuilding was, right?
yeah, I still remember that conversation and us going through those poses. Like, well, let's do the side man. It's like, wait, they call it a side man? Yeah, that's what it's called. And doing all these poses, and yeah, it was one of those things where like this is either gonna go well or it's gonna blow up in our faces. And the competitors loved it, and it was definitely one of those things that's been good. So
I like to add to that, guys. It's kind of like this, and we did it. We were looking at other federation that started it kind of, and we thought, if we don't do it, we're going to lose. Okay, no matter how you shake it, the natural athletes a lot of times, and we only get maybe a couple of years out of most people, they really don't have a pulse on what's really going on. And they see classic, these guys are smaller, right? And they don't think, they think it's the same thing on the natural side. Well, the problem is our athletes were pretty much classic anyway. You got it? So we've got a lot of pushback on this. And so we had to really sit down and figure out how we're going to proceed with the way we wanted to do it, to differentiate it. And if Ryan knows I was kind of no, I was no on that for a while. But then I saw it and it worked out really well. And what it came down to, guys, is we've got really, really good long-term judges. And we set the criteria, and by God, the first year out, we pretty much nailed it down. And it was all about the number one is symmetry. It wasn't how ripped you are, but you better have perfect body shape and balance. And really kind of made our judges do a better job maybe on the bodybuilding side too, because you had to really figure out what is good symmetry. But you didn't have to be shredded for one, and that's still kind of that way. so we decided, hey, let's make different. And Ryan came up, really, you guys pretty much came up with the different poses, and it's really worked out well, I think. So it really has a different look when you go into our shows, I think. And but what's really interesting, guys, is this: you'll have say a guy that's basically a classic guy, and he's in bodybuilding. He's not really lean enough. The bodybuilder, hey, maybe missing a little calf, whatever, and he wins bodybuilding, right? The bodybuilder crosses over into classic, and that guy that was probably third maybe in the bodybuilding side, he's in classic. He wins classic, beats the bodybuilder. But that's a testament to make that we're doing this right. Our judges, we did a really good. This happens a lot, more so than you'd be surprised. So.
As it should. I mean, we ran a show with the WNBF in Ontario. Same thing, right? Our top bodybuilder took, I think, third in our classic division that we ran, or the classic class that we ran, because the shape, right? And looking at like two of your athletes, like Dr. Wright or Dozy, those guys, that's classic, right? Beautiful shape, beautiful muscle bellies, but put them next to, like, I'm forgetting his actual name, but Shreddy Krueger, right? Like, he's by no means classic, but
Carl
man, is he
Siebert.
a good bodybuilder.
Carl
Siebert,
Siebert,
right? Like, Carl,
biggest,
not
nastiest
classic.
bodybuilder.
He is diehard bodybuilder. Yeah, right. So like, and if you have those criteria set, there can be a differentiation and there can be a place for it, in my opinion, for sure. But everyone's heard me voice that opinion 1,000 times.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the things that we do, and we take a risk of doing it, but we allow crossovers, because I think that it gives the competitor, especially the amateurs then can figure out where they fit best, and they're experimenting, like, oh, okay, I kind of try on these board shorts, or I'll put some heels on, and I'll go barefoot, and they're just trying to feel that out. And so once they become a pro, they've kind of figured out, okay, where they fit best. But especially at the beginning, it's like, okay, try different things. And it's, again, it opens us up, because then the judges have to be careful to, okay, hey, yep, this person was in this class before, now they're in a different category. And so it's whole different criteria. So
I completely agree with allowing amateurs to cross over. I think that's a great opportunity, and to see what class they like, where they fit. Like, yeah, I agree. I've seen organizations that don't allow that, and yeah, I like your stance that allow us at the amateur level.
Yeah, it allows them to get the judges' feedback too, like from the professionals, from the guys that are doing, to say like, hey, when you were standing in this lineup, this is what we saw. When you stood in this lineup, though, this stood out, right? And that's what you want, especially on the amateur side, to get that experience. So yeah, I'm totally all for it there. So yeah, you guys allow the crossovers. Now, I feel like this is a perfect. Go ahead.
Not only we allow crossovers for different divisions, we actually we allow novice to go in open. Why not? I mean, it's kind of like if a guy's a brand new competitor, you don't know who he is, pretty much, right? I mean, so he doesn't know where he's at. So why not? If he's pretty decent, why not let him step over there, and then that's his benchmark. You got me? Now with us, until you win novice, the class, you can't go back if you win it first place. You can't go back to novice. But we do allow that step over, and I mean, heck, when I started competing, I never did do novice. I just went right in open. I was just kind of crazy like that.
You were just that good, John. You were just
no, I don't think I was that good. I might have been that
Yeah.
dumb. I don't know, but I think it's a good way to do that. Higher benchmark.
Yeah.
I'm in favor of jumping in the open for almost anyone. So yeah, and I did similarly. I did both, but yeah, I did the open and the novice. Throw my
but
toes.
if had you had to decide, who knows what that decision would have been. I know you're competitive, so you probably would have, but there would be other people maybe that were open caliber that don't, because they don't get the option. So as a coach, I push all my athletes, do as many classes as you can, because it's more experience, right? If this is your first show and you only do debut or you only do novice, we don't know. Like, you could be a great athlete compared to whoever shows up on that given day. And instead of 10 minutes on stage, now you get 30 minutes on stage, right? Which is only going to better you for your posing, and yeah, it just refines the process.
Yeah, agreed. And I like it when coaches say that, because I mean, I coach too, and I tell either my clients or people that I'm talking to, I'm like, look, this is not me trying to upsell you to do other classes. I mean, literally every time you get on stage, you gain confidence, you gain exposure, you get experience. I mean, we've all seen it where somebody their first time out, they're like a deer in a headlight. They forget their name, they don't know where they are, and they jack their posing up, or they forget to pump up, or they forget oil or something. And then they come out, and it's like a whole different person, you know, and so and then even stacking competitions, you know, doing more than one. It's like, you know, get a couple under belt, 2 or 3, make it a season, take some time off, do what you need to do to improve, and then come back. So I think it's a strategy for success.
I think being able to see that from an athlete's perspective too, having we've all competed, right? So like we know that stage experience is valuable. So yeah.
And we try to set it up for success that way too. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, James.
I was just gonna say it's more photos too, right? And that's what,
There
at the end of the day, that's what you walk away
social
with.
media.
It gets cheaper too. I mean, if you think about it, you know, you don't have you've got your entry fee, you've got your suit, you know, you've taken your drug testing, you've got things set up, and so you know it helps the athlete to do that versus like, okay, hey, you know, just doing a one-off. It's a very expensive show just to do one, and that's it. So.
Especially if you don't nail the posing, especially if you're shaking and you're posing because you're nervous, right? So yeah, absolutely. Now there's probably too many shows sometimes, but that doesn't often happen just because people start to fade and it does get expensive. But yeah, a couple shows a season I think is probably a good number. And we could probably dive into your guys' schedule. I know a couple off the top of my hands that, you know, like Windy City always has a good reputation. I'm in New York, so that's kind of one of the closer ones you guys have to us. So we hinted at it a little bit. You said you have a few more on the East Coast and the Southeast now, which I actually wasn't even aware of. So let's talk a little bit outside of Midwest for those people that aren't there, because if they're in the Midwest, they know about you. And then I definitely want to spend a little time talking about the rule change that you guys hinted at on your social media posts.
Sure, absolutely. So we actually have in Virginia, we've got a couple competitions going on there, and you know, coming up here, I'm looking at my calendar now just to make sure I get the dates right here. So let's see here, it's actually, we've got 2 in Virginia and 1 in Florida now. And so in Virginia is October 12th and then June 15th. And then the one in Florida is actually on August 3rd. And so I'm really excited about that. Shelley Fields is the one, her husband Thomas are doing those, and phenomenal promoters. Great. And what's very cool about them is they're collaborating with other federations and other promoters. And because we're very careful about the growth that we do, you know, we don't want to just, you know, continue to, you know, just totally take away from other competitions. So we're trying to find geographic points that make sense, but also then promoters are collaborating with other promoters and stuff. And so, because again, just like we talked about, you know, a competitor should have the opportunity to do from, you know, one contest to the other. We don't tell our athletes, so no, you can only compete with us. You know, they can compete in other federations. And so by putting on posing seminars and things like that with other federations, we're giving them the opportunity to do so. Same thing with Arizona. You know, we brought Arizona online last year, and we've got 2 there this year, August 17th, and then the other one is November 9th. And same scenario, Quaku's down there, and he's, you know, working with other promoters. You know, we've got the same thing going on in Colorado, and so, you know, we're really careful about that growth, but we're also, you know, very inclusive and trying just to help the community itself, the community of natural bodybuilding.
You got to add in Arkansas, the new one, Little Rock.
Yep. New one and Little Rock, and then we have our Canadian affiliate, the NPAA, which they've got one coming up on May 19th, and then also they have one in the fall as well, which this year is on November 2nd. So yeah, so we're definitely got fingers in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, and I think as an athlete, anyone listening that's going to appreciate the way that you guys approach that, right? Like I've even looked at it myself for my own schedules. There's shows that I want to do to support certain promoters or support certain federations or be close to family, and it ends up like 3 shows I want to do are on the same weekend. It's like, well, this isn't going to work now, right? So having them spaced, not so where it's like, all right, there's 6 weeks between, but in a geographic area where it's like, hey, I've got this show this weekend and then a week off, and then the next weekend maybe it's a different federation, but there's a show in the same area. I know up here in Syracuse, Rochester area, that does happen somewhat frequently, where there might be, an OCB show and then a WNBF show, and just kind of back and forth. And it works out well for the athlete, right? And for a federation to look at it from the athlete point of view and not just say like, it's us or nobody, I think a lot of people will respect.
Yeah, I've said it many, many times. Every year I say probably the hardest part of this role, position, whatever you want to call it, is figuring out the schedule. It's because it's not just us. It's what else is going on, and we're looking at geographic, the calendar, all those factors. So it's one of the hardest things. It really is.
That's one of the things that, in 29 years of doing this, it seems like that's usually right at the beginning of the year. It's like this battle, and what happens a lot of times, people think, well, this show does really good there, so I want to get closer to that. Well, that's not necessarily true. It's not how that kind of works. And you got to convince these guys sometimes that no, we got to keep this thing spread out. You just said, from an athlete, 2 weeks, right, is the best way to split things up. And we try to do that as much as we can. I mean, sometimes theaters get in the way, dates and that kind of thing. But the deal is, you got to give a person about a week, they'll come down, and then but they can also fix things in the middle of all that and get with the coach and maybe, now guess what? Next show is going to be so much better for them. I mean, 2 weeks, you can knock a percent or two off, if you can, and bust it, but the bottom line is, like Ryan said, you don't want to stack stuff on top of each other. And that's a problem that we have, right now in the sport. And we as a federation, and Ryan and I just constantly try to figure this stuff out all the time, And so if we expand in an area, say like Colorado, Beck and I, we did that. We kind of opened that up about 6 years ago now. And so we were looking at all these other federations' schedules, and it's like, don't ever put one close to another show. I mean, if you really upset a promoter in that area, and come off as the bad guy, and water me down, all that kind of stuff, go ahead and do that. Put it on the same day. Hey, look, you don't ever do that. That's just good business integrity in my book.
Yeah.
And we've run into that, a lot of problems with that, with other federations as of late, and it's not a good thing. It's really not a good thing for natural athletes. It's not, because what happens, it waters down the shows, and then next thing you know, the trainer's mad because he didn't have enough people in the class to get a pro card. So when you've got, but we'll get into that a little bit later if you want to, Ryan. You want to talk about that? But I mean, I can go on.
I think James got a question to tee that up, actually.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, more is not better. We can probably all agree with that when it comes to shows, right? We all want high quality. You guys have said that you're open with, like your pros competing elsewhere. However, and I actually asked this question for my own information recently, it seems to be that you're changing a rule for amateurs having to come up through the amateur ranks, right? So you have to win the pro card through the IPE to be an IPE pro as of some soon to be date, I believe, correct?
Yep. As of April 1st, for somebody to compete in the IPE, they have to win their IPE card through our amateur ranks. Up to that point, they like an outside pro, natural pro could apply to be an IPE pro as long as they still got their pro card through the criteria, the minimum guidelines. We don't give out, participation pro cards or anything like that. They have to actually have earned it. But if they go through and we can validate all of that, then yes, we would grant them a pro card. But yeah, we as of April 1st, then they have to win their pro card through the NANBF. Yep.
So
So.
what stemmed that decision, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, great. So a lot of things, but the two main things is we actually are probably one of the last federations to implement this procedure because most of them have been doing that. But again, meant for the athlete trying to do that. But what we found was our amateurs were actually being penalized. And so, because what would happen is we'd have all these outside pros wanting to do our pro contests and join the IPE, which is fantastic. That's awesome. But then what happens is the amateurs are losing out because now, their classes would get condensed, they wouldn't have as much competition, and all athletes want competition. And so, yeah, certainly once they're in the pro ranks, they would have all this competition. But as an amateur, they weren't getting that. And so that was really the driving force behind it. So then that way they are able to get more competition. And then the right person would then get their pro card. So so that's really, I think, the main driving factor, at least in my viewpoint. So John, would you want to add into that?
Well, okay, so what we did, though, if you guys remember, during COVID, we actually opened it up and said, if you can pass our test, we're good, because we're trying to do something good for the community, keep it moving, whatever, and probably good for other federations as well to keep their athletes, rolling. But in the process, we thought, well, let's go ahead and keep it open for a while, and we kind of whittled it down. Some federations we thought were, legit, and we could leave it that. Well, so what was going on was we get these guys come in, these pros, and we started doing the vetting process with them. When you go on our website, if you try to do a membership and you're outside pro, you had to go through a vetting process. So you had to tell us, you basically had to get your information on your last drug test for one. Where you won your pro card, not the last show you compete in. How many people were in that class? So we really, really stick to our standards. Okay. And if there wasn't 5 in that class, sorry, we had to turn away a lot of people, believe it or not. And you're hearing this, that these other people have these standards, but it's kind of funny. We're getting several people that want to compete with us on the IPE. Well, they don't meet our standards. I mean, I'm telling this is the honest to God truth, guys. So that's part of it too, from my side. All right. We all know that we had several federations kind of drop into the central part of the United States where we're at. And that was pretty much post-COVID. And all that did is water everything down. And it's kind of delayed our comeback as far as numbers wise. And we talked about earlier, what's that do? Waters things down. Competitors may not be able to get a pro card to class in some shows. So then what happens is we were allowing a federation for them their pros to compete in our shows. Well, problem is they drop in, they buy a membership, they're gone, they win a couple $1,000 or more, and they never compete with us again. These are the things that we're looking at. Are they using us for their pro circuit because they don't have enough competitors in their shows in our area? And here's the big problem. They are not recognizing our pros, but we're providing them a pro circuit in our area. Well, it's over. That's really one of the big driving forces. Would you agree, Ryan?
Yeah, and we're still, they still have a window, up until March 31st, they can still apply, and the same thing that we've been doing. And those that, got their pro card from another federation, join the IPE and keeping their membership active, yeah, they're still in. They're part of the IPE family now. So, but we just, you gotta make those hard calls sometimes and do what's right. So
it's like Ryan said, we were one of the last of the Mohicans. And we held out, but gosh, we kept seeing this standards that they're not there. So how can we justify trusting other federations if they're not keeping the standard level we are? And I'll tell you right now, bottom line is you guys can look into all this, but a lot of these federations, they're allowing TRT, TUEs, right? We don't do that. Very strict. And you're talking to the guy that handles the drug testing for the federation. Pretty much, I'm the drug czar. So when someone sends a note to info@.net, I'm looking it up, see, it's always got these gray area products, and I got to dig into it, find out what's always new, if they're good or not. And, believe me, we basically okay. A lot of federations right now, it's almost like, let's make it easier or do less as far as drug testing, right? We used to be, we're 7 years drug free before the show. You got a polygraph. You do past that, it's 5 years, you're gone. Maybe less than that a little bit. But you go urine on us, you tainted a show, you took away a day in the sun for a competitor and his family. You're gone now. We're live. We started that, a couple of years ago, Ryan? A year ago, I think it was.
Yep.
Because it's just got to be a point where, we're going to make our standards even higher. Now, I'm gonna say, other federations match us. Because I'll tell you what, as you can kind of tell, I get a little heated when I talk about this, because I'm telling you guys, Ryan Irwin and myself, we have high integrity. We don't beat around. We don't BS about this stuff. Because something. The bottom line is this: I got into promoting because I got tired of basically not competing. I competed on the other side, all right, for 6 years. Found this federation, fell in love. I'm like, oh my God, my family. Then they approached me about promoting. I'm like, if I don't do this, no one's going to. And I was the first show in Missouri doing drug-free shows. First. All right. And then now you're seeing people come in and, they're basically as I always like, Becky, my wife, always said, they're living under the shade tree that we built or we grew, So, you compete with us, this guy and I, we're going to protect your investment. That's the number one thing with us. Our number one core value is exactly that. The best drug testing program we can put together. So
I don't think any athlete's going to have a brief for that.
Well, the bottom line is, you're not seeing it though. I mean, they'll go ahead and test the water and go whatever. And the bottom line is, we just, it's just really, because we know our competition as far as federations. We don't. We know what they do. I dig into it all the time. What you guys need to do is this. Sometime when you got time, look up WADA's standards. Look them up. You guys know what they are?
We're finding out more and more as we go along.
No. Okay. They got this great list, right? A mile long. But their guideline and their recommendations, if someone goes hot, is 4 years. All right. Then you can appeal that. They're supposed to have a committee, always, and they can either keep it at 4 or they can actually drop it to 2. All right. And in some places, 1 year. So this whole, WADA, guys, I'm telling you, it's not what it looks like. I mean, the gold standard, this nice website. Hey, Ryan, I'm going to say our drug testing standards are a lot higher than that. They are. You just heard what I said, what we do, right? It's not 4 years. There's no, and the appeal process is this. If you want to go to the next level, we'll go to Smyrtle and pay for the $495 that test. And that's another thing too, guys. When people say Smyrtle, I'm telling you what, there's no way that they can afford that kind of a test on every competitor. Smyrtle has a lower level gas chromatography, just like Abbott and these guys. All right. It's about $120. I'm just telling you what's going on. All right. So the bottom line is, as you can tell, I'm divulging a lot of stuff here, but it's the truth, guys. All right. Take over, Ryan. I'm done. Stop me, Mr. Wizard.
Ryan's twitching there. Yeah. What do you
Jason
got,
was over
Ryan?
it. I was kind of.
No, I think that kind of circling back to, I mean, we're implementing that outside pros have to, qualify through our ranks. But I mean, what the sport needs, and it's no secret, everybody knows it, is we need more unity. I mean, natural bodybuilding's greatest enemy is natural bodybuilding. And so we have worked in the, 20 plus years that I've been involved with the Federation, tried to bring in that unification. And and there's times that we've went down that road, didn't work. We've learned some things, and we are at the point now where those obstacles that we've seen in the past have to be overcome. And the reason for it is because if they're not, then the sport's going to continue to be cannibalized and continue to drift apart. And so I would say that even though, other federations, and us included now, say, okay, yes, you have to be a part of our organization to compete as a pro, but let's figure out how can we unify, how can we create like a Super Bowl, at the end of the season where there's a championship, take the champions of every championship. Let's do one big Super Bowl, or maybe it's a coalition or something, but for those in the leadership position, other federations that are listening to this, let's talk, let's figure this out, because if we don't, it's just going to be bad for the sport.
Well, like you guys heard, we got a little passion for making sure we do it right. And if there's a federation out there that wants to do it right, hey, we're in. Let's get it done. I mean, look, Ryan, what year was that you guys had the big summit with Jim Evans and those guys? What was that, years ago?
Oh man, I can't remember, John.
That's been 10 years ago, 15 maybe?
Probably. Oh yeah, it's been longer than that, I bet.
Do you guys ever remember that? There was a big group of people that came together and they were trying to
before our time.
Yeah. See, don't you you guys gotta like this. But no, almost every federation got, and Ryan was kind of involved. Did you go to that? Was that Fred Rowlett at the time?
Yeah, that wasn't me. That wasn't me.
Yeah, you were the treasurer, I think, at the time, right? Federation. But yeah, they all came back with all this warm fuzzies, but really nothing really came out, to be honest with you. I mean, it was kind of like, well, look, let's go ahead and get the ball rolling. I mean, we've tried, believe me, and we're like, okay, we're probably the only federation out there that has actually worked with two federations, major ones, and we're with them for years. Everything went good. Then all of a sudden, it was like, hey, they're not going to allow us to expand into a state because that was theirs. Well, that kind of rubbed us raw. And Fred at the time decided, well, I'm going to look elsewhere. And then we went to another federation. And that fell apart, not because of us. It was because the two ownerships had a big to-do. And we were part of that. And so we went went the other way. And so a lot of damage done to natural bodybuilding by that kind of stuff. And it's mostly all it comes down to is, revenue, whatever. And that's the sad part of it. It's like, I never got into promoting because I wanted to make a bunch of money. And believe me, you don't make a lot of money. I hate to tell you that. Well,
we found that out. Yep.
It's kind of funny because everybody wants to be a promoter, and then when you start figuring out the capital you got to come up with to do it, it's a different ball game.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and it comes down to, it's not, I mean, yes, it's a business, but at the same time, for those that really have a passion for the sport or in it for the right reasons, these things have to be figured out. And so I'll go back to that and say, yeah, has to happen. It has to happen.
Right.
More unity, less division.
I mean, the whole bottom line is we want this thing to keep going, guys. I mean, we really do. It's like, I can remember when we were together with other federations, we had huge numbers. Everybody had big numbers back then. I mean, if you guys realize since probably would think, Ryan, 2016 back, for example, my show, we were over 200 competitors all the time. How about 6 years? We were at 250 plus. We had to do a Friday night a bikini, well, figure at the beginning and bikini after that. And we ended up actually starting the live judging format out of necessity, because we had to be able to get all these women on Friday night done, and we had almost 100 at one time, like several years. Get them all judged and tallied and all that real quick. So we, a friend of ours, God rest his soul, Mr. Mark, he came up with a program, and it's all computerized. You write down your number, send down a line, it's plugged in, it's done. And he came up with that. God, it had to been like 2007, 2008. So we've been doing that long, but we were doing it and didn't know we were doing it. You know what I mean? We did that the next day. We would actually do the old style. So, pre-judging files. And we thought, hey, well, let's go ahead and put it all together. Why not? It works great. And then everybody else kind of came into the fold. And that's how we did it, the whole federation.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting you bring up the numbers, because there's a lot of conversations. I don't know if it's a generational thing or not, but people talk about like, oh, like the heyday or the golden day of natural bodybuilding. And we're past that, and we're yada, yada. I would disagree. I just think it's a structural, a federation, an organizational, or institutional issue, right? Like the athletes, I'd say there's more athletes than ever, and we're seeing it on an international scale, the quality. I mean, yeah, there were dudes that were crazy back then, but we're seeing people. I mean, I just like Benjamin Schuster jumps to mind, right? One of the WNBF guys out of, Europe. Oh man. And the talent is just growing and growing and growing. It's just there's too many areas for them to compete. So like you said, they're dispersed, it's diluted, where back then there were less options. So it kind of consolidated everybody. And that's what you guys are trying to do with your rule, push everyone through the amateurs, consolidate them there, may the best man win the pro card. So the pro card means something again, which is something we just covered in our last podcast, which will air, like what does a pro card mean if you can walk in and just win it?
And we've never been like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just kind of thing of where's the prestige and competing against one other person on stage and getting a pro card. It really, you don't really know where you're at, for one. I mean, when Ryan and I were competing earlier, it was bodybuilding. That was it. The whole show. You had 100 competitors, but they're all bodybuilders. You had huge classes to get your pro card. Took a while, but like you said, though, I truly believe you're right. And okay, let me ask you guys a question. Why do you think numbers and shows are less? I mean, what do you see out? I mean, you're now kind of linked in a lot more people than, we're kind of in our own little nest here, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just in the US, it's probably more of a concern in the US, right? Which is where we're all based, obviously. When you look at the UK, when you look at Europe, when you look at some of the Asiatic countries, there's less federations. Like I know one of the federations, and I think it was Thailand, like 400 athletes, right? Because they only have one show. So everyone's there. Look at the US, East Coast alone, I don't know, probably 80 shows, something like that, some crazy number. I know one federation that, I'll leave names out of it. I think they're up to like 100 shows in the US, right? Is that best for the sport? I don't know. I love the idea of it lowers the barrier to entry because someone can compete in their backyard. They don't have to do this massive travel, but there's probably a sweet spot that might have been missed, right? You don't have to do 100. You also don't have to do 5, right? Like make it easy to travel to, make it lower the barrier to entry, but create the quality.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
I love it. And so we're closing up on an hour. So I want to make sure, because I'm sure we could talk all night about all sorts of different topics. For our listeners, the points that I got from this, right? High judging criteria, right? You guys are good at differentiating between your classes, and you have a good, strong standard there. Strong drug testing standards as well, and not allowing for some of the exemptions that some federations do. And you're looking for unity and growth forward, right? So probably the athlete is going to be respected. Is there anything else you would want to leave with the listeners, for those that are not as aware of you guys? What's like the parting message?
Yeah, I'll say a couple things. One is, probably one of the things I'm excited about is the transformation category. I mean, I think that I'm in this sport because I love what it does for people's health and their lifestyle, and so when we brought the transformation on, and I say this from the podium oftentimes, and I try to inspire people to talk to people outside of the natural bodybuilding community, to get them in there, because I've seen people do that and then they end up becoming competitors. And whether or not they make that step, it doesn't matter. But the point is that they're making a change in their life. And I've seen it make an impact on me, and I've seen it make an impact on others. And so I'm always get excited about that. And then the other thing, and I'll let John talk about this more, but this year for Worlds, we're actually offering a bigger event here. So John, do you want to kind of talk about that?
Yeah, we're going to actually take our Masters Pro Worlds contest that was in Memphis for the inception. We're going to put it together with our Open Worlds in October. So
Okay.
I want to get that word out. Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll make that's the sound clip. There we go. So you're consolidating your two big shows of the year, one massive, one Masters, and Open Worlds. I like it.
Yes,
yeah, because there's like we're masters, we're old guys, and there's a lot of older natural bodybuilders, because all those people that started back in the 80s and 90s, they're in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. They still want to compete, and so we want to give them every opportunity to do so. So
and you have one spot there too, and you have these like the 40 plus, 50 plus guys that, do I want to try to compete against the Open guys anymore? Well, if it's all together in one show, well, they can.
You have the option
step
to.
over and so I think the Masters may grow because of that a little bit. So there you go.
Absolutely. All right. Well, again, I want to thank you guys for your time. We appreciate you coming on. I'm sure we'll have many conversations in the future. And to the listeners, if you made it all the way through this, we appreciate you guys tuning in. If you liked it, subscribe, share, like, comment, tag, all the fun stuff that you're supposed to do on social media to help us grow the IPE, to help us grow the natural bodybuilding in general, right? We're all in it for the sport and for the athlete. So we appreciate you guys. We'll see you in the next one.
You guys are great.